Don't expect Biden's meeting with Xi Jinping next week to revive US-China relationship. There are too many fundamental differences, and the agreements we will see will be fairy dust in a sea of problems facing China and its foreign policies. Now, let's discuss what we can expect when APEC summit takes place in San Francisco and Xi Jinping meets Biden. Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. It's that season again. Like Christmas, once a year we get together and pretend to enjoy the festive season before the dinner table inevitably turns into a political argument and everyone gets mad. Just kidding. But seriously though, when it comes to the US-China relationship, it's like two people who know that they're going to break up soon, but have the occasional makeup period. This coming Wednesday, Biden will meet Xi Jinping in San Francisco at the APEC summit. And that's the first meeting since Bali, Indonesia last year, around November 2022. Now, what we can expect here is the following. Now, the big problems are not going to go away. They're not even getting solved. So this meeting will likely circle around not letting the bilateral relationship between China and the United States spiral into conflict. Now, here are the big differences. First, the number one problem facing the US and China right now is ideology. Xi Jinping is walking a totalitarian path, exporting terrorism, communism, and socialism around the world. And the CCP is creating an axis of evil, leading it among nations like Russia, North Korea, Iran, and Syria. Whereas the United States is a polar opposite state, leading the democratic world. Now, that alone is enough to call it differences on a macro level. Now, among that is a key word, credibility. Most of the world actually runs on credibility. The American society is built on credits and trust. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. The Chinese Communist Party has lost the trust of the American people as well as the American government. And a big part of that is the ideological differences driving the CCP's aggression and lies. And they've fooled the Americans for 40 plus years since the approachment or engagement from the Nixon era all the way up until the beginning of Trump. Now, second, the number two problem is that all in China, you will notice that something is interesting, which is the reason why Xi Jinping is meeting Biden is because China's domestic situation has gotten so bad. We've done multiple videos on this in all areas of society, and it needs the United States to step in to help. So this trip to the US is about getting some level of reduction on the pressure in terms of exports and economic policies that the United States has put out against China in recent years. And so Xi Jinping comes, of course, with leverages and bargaining chips to do that. Prior to the meeting, Treasury Secretary Yellen met with her counterpart, who is the economic czar of China, He Lifeng. And this was ahead of the leadership meeting this Wednesday. So that's enough of a sign that the economy will be a major focus of this upcoming meeting. Now, the context is this, right? Since last time the two met in Bali, which was November 2022, China has experienced some of the worst economic conditions since then, and that's in decades. So that massive swing from a year ago in terms of the economy is enough to shift the focus this time around to purely try to get China to survive off of help from the United States. Now, before we continue to talk about more, here is my sponsor segment for today. Now, if you're an avid tea drinker or want to get into Asian tea culture, I've got a unique opportunity here for you. So we were able to acquire a limited batch of Taiwan High Mountain tea on pre-sale. So this is a variety of oolong tea that comes from the Ali Mountain in Taiwan with an altitude of 1,000 meters or higher in elevation. So this batch is the winter harvest directly from the tea farmers, and we got it to be sourced and shipped from Taiwan. Now, many tea brands out there, when it comes to the Taiwan High Mountain tea, would use a blend or a mix of Vietnamese and Taiwanese tea leaves. But this one that we got is purely from the high mountains. So the taste profile is what I can describe as very suitable for new tea drinkers. It's a hint of orchid floral sweetness, as well as, unlike many of the tea leaves when it comes to green tea, is that they have much of a bitter taste from the theophylline, which is a chemical that produces that bitter taste. And this one would take 5 to 6 brews to get there. So you have the enjoyable sweet taste first for the few taste and brew. But you must also use water that's slightly cooled when you brew these. So check it out. The next inventory will be here soon. And of course, it's limited in quantity. So make sure you place your order right now so that it can get shipped to you immediately. And there's also a black tea variant as well that we sell. Remember, you'll get a 15% off of your order when you use my code, which is in the description. And also, you can enjoy free shipping when you spend $70 or more in the United States. All right, let's continue. Xi Jinping has a bottomless spending funnel. It's called the Belt and Road Project. While the project is the CCP's global infrastructure campaign, in reality, it's more like a influence operation. It can sink an unlimited amount of money with no economic returns. So it's not really an investment that's normally done for money. It's really about investing in global influence, which means that there still has to be a way for China to make money. And until Xi Jinping is fully ready to split from the rest of the world, aka closing it off, to set off a war in Taiwan, he still needs to export to the United States. And so this is a fundamental reality, even if the CCP tries otherwise. To reduce US restrictions on China, like semiconductor or other high-tech exports, the CCP is bargaining a deal using Russia and Iran, aka the tension in Ukraine and the Middle East. Should the US seek to minimize the problems in these two areas, which it definitely wants to, it needs China's help, or at least China needs to appear like it is a friend on these matters. Of course, with the two countries, China is already very friendly with, Russia and Iran. And they're both engaged in proxy operations, one with Israel, Hamas, the other one with Ukraine. And so in those respective areas, China has a lot of say. But that's on paper. Obviously, we know that China has not done anything concrete to stop the war in Ukraine, nor has it actually supported the peace in the Middle East outside of verbal calls. And so this is just to extract some level of concession from the Biden administration and to aid in the economic recovery in China. So basically, we're trading empty promises from the CCP for real economic objectives. And that is really, really important to understand. Now, the third difference is the key Taiwan issue. Like what we have basically witnessed since the start of the Trump administration, and actually for the near term in terms of dealing with China's Taiwan policy, let's just stick with the past 3 years since Biden came into office, there hasn't been any real change in the official policy toward Taiwan from the United States, which, of course, that itself is also an extension from the Trump administration all the way back to the Bush, to Obama, to Clinton, and so on. And so this is not something new, right? But I also don't expect another change in this policy anytime soon either. But that's also the fundamental difference between the US and China when it comes to Taiwan. The US, of course, won't budge on Taiwan. It's arming Taiwan, in fact. And China will neither push around, give up on the idea of taking Taiwan, or simply be soft on the verbal approach to talking about Taiwan. So this is a dead set difference already in the making. Now, both sides, of course, are arming, whether they're arming each other in terms of Taiwan and the United States, or in terms of China arming itself for the upcoming conflict, which will come before 2027. Now, both sides know that they're not fully ready yet as we speak. And so this meeting serves as a temporary reality check in both sides' military as well as political understanding towards the matter. And that's why we see the news that the CCP is also trying to restart military-to-military communication channels, or at least expressed willingness to do so. Now, the last major difference is managing competition versus confrontation. These two terms are often talked about by the Biden administration. But let's face it, the Biden administration is only going to be so tough on China because it's an administration-wide thinking that they're not there to defeat China, right? In their words, it's seek regime change in China won't happen. And so for the past 3 years, it's been called competition instead of confrontation. But the reality is that the CCP, on the other side, views the US-China relationship as one of confrontation, if not a straight-up brawl. The struggle against the United States has been a party understanding inside the CCP since its creation in the 1900s. So the US is always at a disadvantage in terms of thinking that somehow this Chinese Communist Party entity is only trying to compete with them rather than trying to confront them or straight up trying to attack them. And so when it comes to this so-called responsible competition, in reality, it's more like unsanctioned brawl from the perspective of the CCP. So still, we have to see some concrete actions, like banning China's access to high-tech chips, offering security guarantees to the Philippines, arming Taiwan, forming a global coalition against China's geopolitical basis. These actions have been done or are in progress of being done. And that's inevitably going to create a problem where we see the US-China relationship will never be the same. They're never going to land a killing blow, but at the same time, they're also never going to let them off easily. And so it's almost like it's cripple but then bandage, or punch you and then feed you candy at the same time. This makes it very difficult for this yearly summit, or even every summit between Xi and Biden or whoever else, to be a very temporary sort of stress relief factor rather than a permanent factor. And so maybe for 2 weeks or even a few months into the year, right? Last year, after their November meeting, in February the next year, which is 2023, we saw the spy balloon incident. And then we saw we had the whole big issue with diplomacy between the US and China. So maybe they'll stop attacking each other for a while, but it will never work out to be a long-term reset because both sides are not giving up on their fundamental differences and their respective view of each other. And so what this will serve, again, is just a check stop towards the other person's progress to avoid overreaching into a state where both sides are ready for war, right? You're throwing nuclear warheads around. That's not the case that where the rest of the world wants to be in. And so the deterioration of the relationship needs to have a check stop or a pit stop, whatever you want to call it. And most other countries like that. The number one and the number two power maintaining a fragile but not broken relationship. So it's like if you and another person is dating, right? But both of you hate each other in this relationship. Now, you guys can't break up yet for some reason. Maybe it's mortgage or car or a kid, whatever. And then while you guys are still dating, the other person keeps abusing you. And then you abuse them a little bit too, right? You guys are trying to get at each other. But then every so often, you offer each other some nice comments. That's the US-China relationship. And it's really dumb if you think about it, right? The other person, aka the CCP, keeps using words or say even gaslighting you or whatever they do, virtual signaling, words that you said apparently during last year's vacation retreat at Bali as some sort of a promise that you have to keep. Even though you guys know you're eventually going to break off. And then even though those words were said in public, nobody else seems to know exactly what you're talking about, but you still try to maintain that that's what exactly the promise they made for you. And apparently it's okay for the other person to not keep any promise, but if you don't keep yours, ooh, they threat to do something. Confused, right? Yeah, so am I. Anyways, the Chinese Communist Party is really interesting. Prior to this meeting was announced, China's state news agency, Xinhua News Agency, and its state media paper, People's Daily, they've repeatedly published articles on US-China relations, stressing that, quote, the healthy and stable development of the bilateral relations is not only in line with the fundamental interest of the two countries and their people, but also the common expectation of the international community. They're always trying to play the moral high ground, saying, oh, we're the one who's trying to change now, we're playing nice, and so on. They actively changed the doom tone from just a few weeks prior. Such a two-faced act, but it does indicate a meeting is coming and it's one that the CCP desperately needs. Now, we recently discussed a piece of news from sources in China saying that the Chinese side asked all US officials to maintain a smile when talking and meeting Xi Jinping, including Biden. Such a weird request, but it's so in line with the Chinese Communist Party's face image and creating the so-called good atmosphere for the meeting between Xi and Biden. Now, are we to just forget that all the problems that the two countries face with each other for this particular meeting? Well, nobody actually forgets. It's just that everyone seems to want a temporary rest. So what exactly will they actually agree on? Small things, but also likely to fall through eventually because the same promises were made throughout last year and yet we haven't seen anything concrete come to place. For example, climate change, fentanyl, human rights, and these appear every so often, yet nothing seems to get done about them. But they're really good bargaining chips too, right? You want China to improve on its human rights, crack down on fentanyl or climate change, well, you better listen to China more. Now, South China Morning Post also revealed that it includes an agreement to ban the use of artificial intelligence in autonomous weaponry, such as drones, and in the control and deployment of nuclear warheads. So that's another military point that could go really well with the current competition on technology and the artificial intelligence side. But again, without those fundamental differences achieved in terms of changes, all this is but a momentary change that won't last very long. All right, that's it today for the episode on what to expect for the Xi Jinping meeting with Biden in San Francisco. If you enjoyed the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts on this topic, as well as subscribe to our channel today. All right, I'm David Zhang, this is China Insider. See you next time.